I found out that my wife has been cheating on me with an ex-boyfriend from high school, so I decided to get some revenge by not only divorcing my wife on the spot, but also by completely ruining her cheating affair partner's life altogether by exposing him for the cheater that he is, resulting in him getting a divorce, losing his job, and getting evicted. Here's what happened. So way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6 years old, so they were still young, but not so young that they couldn't tell you something about what had happened during the day. Well, they started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much, which is, by the way, basically every day that she wasn't working her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but she really was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 miles or so per week. So it's right then that I knew that something was up. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. Now I could not resist, and I went ahead and logged in to read her emails, and I saw a few email exchanges between her and her college best friend where they discussed how my wife was regularly spending time with one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. And by spending time, I think you know what I mean. There were no mentions of details about him other than my wife also talking garbage about his wife and making fun of how she'd gotten so fat after having kids. So I printed out these email exchanges and I stashed them away. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy that he knew that had left the force to become a private investigator who we will call Ron. Now Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, locations, saying everything about how she would take the kids to her parents' house and then go meet this guy for lunch. Then they go to a dumpy hotel for a few hours, after which she would pick up the kids and return home. Well, at this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely messed up mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy, and Ron absolutely came through. He learned this guy's name, who we will call Bob, and that he was married and had 3 children. I also found out that he worked as a vice president of sales for his father-in-law's business. Now, at this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, as well as one more thing I wanted him to do. On the same day, I had my wife serve with the divorce papers at her work, and I had Ron meet with the guy's wife and show her everything that he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear husband was up to, because what she did with that information was up to her from here on out. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and then she left. And as soon as her dad found out what he had done, Bob was fired. And since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was really ugly. Lots of fighting in and eventually out of court, and I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point where her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a couple more incidents with police reports, as well as criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days, and last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. When it comes to me, my ex and I get along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything like that, but I only care in the context that she is my kid's mom, and while she is important to them, trust me when I say this, to me, she is absolutely nothing beyond that. Okay, I love this story for a few reasons, but the biggest one is the fact that this really did work out in the original poster's favor, because they documented everything perfectly. Now, normally I wouldn't be the kind of person to be like, oh yeah, let me go through some emails, but he was obviously noting that his wife was acting weird, so he had to get some kind of evidence to kind of back up his claims. From the private investigator to him printing off the emails just in case she tried to delete them, team. Like, all of this is so smart and so well done. And I just love the fact that he went after the guy that his wife was cheating with. Like, that is absolutely brilliant because that guy's wife absolutely deserved to know. So truly, good job for getting revenge on this guy and taking him down completely, because he, along with your former wife, absolutely ruined so much in this family. And that, in my opinion, absolutely deserves to be punished. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled manager demands that I work faster, stating that my accuracy on the job doesn't matter and that she only cares that I get it done in a timely manner. So I decide to maliciously comply, resulting in the store nearly going under from missing sales, as well as my manager needing to answer for her crimes. Here's what happened. So I work in a big retail chain where the stockroom is the Wild West and chaos is the norm. We recently got a new supervisor who we will call Sarah, who seems to think she's running the Navy SEALs or something like that. She is obsessed with speed, constantly on us about how we need to get things done faster and that it doesn't matter if it's right as long as it's done fast. So one day during peak restock time, when we're drowning in boxes, Sarah storms in with her clipboard and her best I'm in charge face. She corners me while I'm halfway through a massive inventory check and says to me, "You're taking way too long with these. Just get through them quickly. We don't have time to check every single item." I then tried to explain that rushing inventory checks is a bad idea, but she cuts me off with a condescending smile. "If you can't speed this up, maybe this job just isn't right for you." And she says this all smug like she dropped a bombshell. Well, alright Sarah, you want speed? Let's see how fast things can spiral out of control. So I take her words to heart and I decide to follow her instructions exactly. The next day I'm scheduled for another inventory check, and instead of my usual process where I count everything carefully, I decide to play Sarah's game. I glance at the shelves and make up numbers that seem about right. I don't even bother opening boxes to check if what's inside matches the labels. I fly through the whole process, marking items off like I'm speedrunning a video game. What usually takes me 2 hours, I finish in about 20 minutes. Sarah sees me finish up, and I can see her eyes light up. She walks over, grinning ear to ear. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it? If you keep this up, you might even get a little bonus this month." And she says this, patting herself on the back for her brilliant leadership skills. Fast forward a week, and the store manager, who we will call Mike, calls for an emergency meeting. The inventory reports have come back, and they were a total disaster. According to the report, we're missing thousands of dollars worth of products. It looks like we either lost half the stock or we're running some underground black market. Mike is pissed, customers are complaining about out-of-stock items, and the regional manager is breathing down his neck. Mike turns to Sarah and asks her to explain how this could have happened. Now Sarah, trying to save face, immediately points at my team and says, "They must have messed up the counts. They weren't thorough enough." She's literally throwing us under the bus without a second thought. And this is where I decided to strike. I raise my hand and I say to him, "Actually, I did exactly what Sarah told us to do. She said to skip checking the items and just get it done as quickly as possible. I was just following orders." When I said this, you could hear a pin drop. Mike slowly turns to Sarah, his expression going from confused to furious. He then asked her, "Is this true?" And his eyes were narrowing at her. At this point, Sarah starts stammering, trying to backtrack. "Well, I didn't mean to skip it entirely. I just meant to speed it up." But you know what? It was too late. The damage is done. Mike is already fuming. He then goes on to say, "So you decided to cut corners on the one thing that affects our bottom line? You do realize we have to do a full recount because of this mess, right?" And you know what? That's exactly what happens. The next day, Sarah and a few unlucky team members spend 12 hours redoing the entire inventory check from scratch. The rest of us get to enjoy watching them sweat it out while we handle our regular duties. And trust me, it was glorious. As they're counting, I make sure to walk by every so often and ask them, "Need any help speeding things up? I could skip a few checks for you if that helps." Well, the look on Sarah's face every time is pure rage mixed with embarrassment. She can't say anything because she knows I'm just doing what she asked for. By the end of it, we have found thousands of dollars in discrepancies. It turns out, rushing through inventory checks leaves a lot of room for errors. I mean, who knew? The regional manager isn't happy, and Sarah ends up getting a formal warning. She stops harping on us about speed after that, and even tries to be extra nice whenever I'm around. So I guess she realized that maybe, just maybe, some jobs shouldn't be rushed. Now the best part about this is that a couple of weeks later, I get a small bonus for outstanding attention to detail and helping fix the inventory mess. And trust me, the irony is not missed on me. And Sarah couldn't even look me in the eye when I got the bonus slip. And now every time she walks by me, I just give her a friendly smile and I say to her, "Don't worry, boss. I'm working as fast as you want." And honestly, it feels good every single single time I do it. Wow, how in the world did Sarah keep her job? Like seriously, how did she keep her job after messing up that badly? Not only is she incredibly condescending and very rude, but she also was talking down to you and the rest of the employees while also literally almost tanking the entire store. What in the world was she thinking, not allowing you to like check through the inventory properly? That is a dumb decision, and honestly, she should have been fired like right there on the spot. But you know what? Good for you for speaking up and not allowing Sarah to throw you under the bus, because that's exactly what this lady was planning on doing. Am I the jerk for refusing to share a table in a crowded coffee shop with another patron all because she smelled really badly? Because right now, after recounting this story to my friends, they're all saying that I'm actually the jerk here, and at this point, I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 22-year-old female, and I was studying at a popular coffee shop in my town yesterday afternoon. It was crowded, but I was lucky enough to get a two-person table with an outlet. I stayed there for maybe 3 hours, and I ordered multiple items throughout my stay. Well, about an hour into my stay, a girl about my age smelled really badly of the herb, if you know what I mean, and she asked if she could share my table so that she could study as well. I looked around and every other chair was occupied, and there were even people standing beside the tables. I absolutely despise the smell of the herb. It's legal in my state, so there's no issue there, but it makes me nauseous and it gives me a headache, so I knew there was no way I could get anything done with that girl across from me. So without mentioning her smell, I told her no and that I needed my personal space. Now, instead of walking away, she pressed and said if I wanted my personal space, then I shouldn't be studying in the most popular coffee shop in town. I then told her that I specifically didn't want her at my table because she smelled like an herb farm and she should take a shower before she tries to infringe on a stranger's personal space. Now, I thought she would go away after that, but she told me she was sitting at my table whether I liked it or not, and she even put her things down thinking maybe I would leave. Well, instead, I flagged down an employee and I explained the situation, and thankfully she sided with me and asked the girl to leave, even saying she would call security if she didn't do so. I resumed my work, but I felt a bit shaken by the situation. Later that evening, I recalled what happened to some of my friends, and I thought they would agree that she was being a jerk, but to my surprise, a couple of my friends told me that I was the unreasonable one. One of them is familiar with a coffee shop and told me that it was rude of me to hog a table, even though I bought 2 drinks and a pastry throughout my stay, and that if I really had a problem with someone smelling bad, I should have just left. Another one of my friends said that my comment about how that person smelled was out of line, and even if someone is being rude, I shouldn't talk like that to a stranger. This then sparked a huge debate until I agreed to post this online to settle this once and for all. So am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? No, you're not the jerk at all. This lady could have smelled like anything. She could have had really bad body odor. She could have been wearing the worst smelling perfume on planet Earth. She could have smelled like wet dog. Honestly, it doesn't matter to me. It's the fact that this lady smelled bad and not just because she was smoking the herb that really is the crux of this conversation. So with that in mind, of course you're not the jerk. This lady smelled bad. Who in their right mind would want to sit next to someone like that? Especially if they're going to have that kind of attitude. So not only do I think your friends are completely wrong, but they're also siding with the wrong person. Like, you're not the one who walked up to the table and said, I'm going to sit here whether you like it or not. I don't care if I smell bad. Instead, you were the one who was sitting there for 3 hours, literally minding your own business, and then the stinky hippie walked up and tried to be like, I'm going to impose on your space because I deserve to be here. So no, you're not the jerk here, because the way that lady was acting was completely out of line. This next story came from the Am I the Jerk subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for not attending my sister's wedding, all because of her wedding tax she's imposing on the family? Because after getting into a huge fight, I'm now considering not showing up after she gave me the ultimatum that either I chip into the wedding or I don't even bother showing up. Here's what happened. Okay, so here's a bit of backstory. My younger sister, who we will call Emily, is getting married in a couple of months, and while I'm super happy for her, there's been some drama over the whole wedding planning process. Emily and her fiance decided to have a small wedding, which I totally understand, but they also decided to impose a wedding tax on family members attending. They have a list of wedding expenses, things like venue decor and catering, and they expect each family member to contribute extra to make it all happen. To top it all off, her fiance's family is also chipping in, making the whole thing feel less like a celebration and more like a business deal. When my sister brought this up, I couldn't help but voice my concern. I told her that it felt unfair to ask family to cover the cost on top of giving a gift. I suggested maybe doing a more budget-friendly wedding so that everyone could enjoy it, but she just brushed aside my suggestions. We then had a huge argument about it, and it turned into a shouting match. I told her that weddings should be about love, not financial burdens. In the weeks that that followed, she refused to speak to me and even blocked my number for a while. I felt really hurt, but then I received an invitation to the wedding, complete with a note saying that if I wasn't chipping in, then I shouldn't even bother showing up. So I've been debating whether or not to go. On one hand, I want to support my sister, but on the other hand, I feel like it's really messed up to so blatantly ask for cash from family. My parents think that I should just suck it up, contribute, and attend for the sake of the family. Meanwhile, my friends are telling me that I'd be better off skipping it altogether. So am I the jerk for considering not going to my sister's wedding, all because of the wedding tax? Am I being the jerk for standing my ground on what I believe should be a joyful occasion and not some kind of financial obligation? What should I do? No, you are not the jerk. This really does seem like an unfair thing for people to have to cover themselves. Like if they want to have an expensive wedding, then congratulations, you can pay for it. Why should I have to be expected to have some kind of wedding tax, all because you're going over budget and you can't afford it? Because at that point, if I'm literally helping fund this wedding, then I better have a say in what kind of food's being served and how the venue's gonna look. And chances are you were probably already gonna give like some kind of wedding gift. So for her to be like, oh, there's a wedding tax on top of that, if you want to show up, you better chip into the wedding. Like that is really weird and in my opinion, completely inappropriate. So no, you're not the jerk here because the way your sister's acting, in my opinion, is incredibly entitled. My idiotic manager demands that I don't give my input anymore no matter what, claiming that it's either his way or the highway, and that if he wants my input, then he will ask for it. So when I decide to maliciously comply, things go so bad that the company ends up losing thousands of dollars on merchandise over an incident that would have been preventable if they would just listen to me in the first place. Here's what happened. So a few months ago, a new business investor at work came on board as a manager, and he has been an absolute nightmare. He is cracking down on anything he considers to be a waste of time, and he is incredibly unforgiving. After a week of watching us work, he and the other managers held a company-wide meeting to apparently iron out some wrinkles in the company that he observed since he started. It wasn't an open dialogue though. In fact, that's one of the things he wanted to wrinkle out. It was essentially just 20 minutes of him saying, it's our way or the highway, just deal with it. The line of him saying, if we want your input, we'll ask for it, period, really stuck with me though. And it was made abundantly clear afterwards that it was directed at me. The company has had a problem recently with employee turnover, and I was in the position to know why, since I interact with everyone through my role. Essentially, people are quitting because the work they were doing wasn't what they signed up to do. The phrase, if I knew this was what I would be doing, I wouldn't have accepted the job, was a common sentiment. They accepted the job under the impression that they would be serving customers, answering emails and phone calls, you know, general customer service stuff, but instead they spent about 90% of their time in a hot warehouse packing online orders over and over again. I shared that with management, and I let them know what the people leaving were saying, in case they wanted to take that into account moving forward. Well, they just thanked me and then I left. But the new manager hated that so much that he decided to make a meeting about giving them advice that they don't want. They spoke with me privately afterwards and referred back to when I told them about what the quitting employee said, and they told me that the way they interpreted that was that I was implying that they were being deceitful when hiring people. I told them no, I don't think that at all. I was just relaying what those people were saying about how they felt, but they didn't care. They doubled down and said again, if we want your input, we will ask for it, period. So that's how I knew it was directed at me. I asked them for clarification, like what constitutes advice or input, and the new boss said to me, unless you were asking a question about the work you're supposed to be doing, we don't want to hear it. We don't want your opinion on how you think that we should handle situations. We don't want your ideas on how you think the business can be run better. And we don't want gossip about what other people are saying about us. Just focus on your job. So you know what? Fine then. I will absolutely roll with that, no problem. I've worked for them for years, and they have always appreciated my ideas, opinions, and input all the way up until that point. But hey, if they don't want my input anymore, that's their choice, and I will respect that. I knew it was just the new boss saying that stuff, since this sort of attitude with them only started when he did, but the others either agree with him or were too intimidated to disagree. But either way, whatever. I will comply with their request. Since then, the problem hasn't been fixed. We've had 2 more people come and go, with both of them saying they're working stuff they didn't sign up for. A third one started about 5 weeks ago, and he has taken his frustration in a different direction. I've overheard him complaining over and over again to other people about how he didn't sign up to stand around in a hot warehouse for hours, and that he doesn't want to pack online orders. But instead of quitting like everybody else, he just got angrier and angrier, and then he hulked out. I was upstairs at my desk when I started hearing smashing. I went down to the warehouse to see what was going on, and this guy was taking customer packages and smashing them out of frustration. A few others in the warehouse gathered gathered around and just watched in amusement. I mean, this was like something out of a cartoon. The new boss heard the commotion and came down. And long story short, the guy was fired and I was asked if I knew why he flipped out. I said to him, well, I don't know what happened exactly to cause him to freak out, but I know that for weeks he's been complaining about not signing up to work in a hot warehouse for hours. Maybe he just reached his tipping point about it. I'm not really sure. He then said to me, well, why didn't you tell us? So, of course, I said to them exactly how I felt. Well, because last time I told you that employees were complaining about that, and you accused me of implying that you were being deceitful when hiring them. Then you told me to stop gossiping. Well, this guy had to eat crow for a bit on that, which was so absolutely delicious to witness. But I was also reprimanded for taking the request too literally, and he accused me of being petty. But it's like, whatever, I don't really care, because I had to adjust the stock levels for the goods that had to be replaced, and they ended up losing about $10,000 in that guy's rampage. And some of the items that were smashed were worth about $2,000 each. And sure, perhaps enjoying that does make me just a little bit petty, but learning that it cost this much really made this entire experience very worthwhile. Wow, it's crazy to me that managers can be this dense, and they don't seem to understand that yes, they need input from lower managers. Like the original poster knew exactly why people were getting pissed off and quitting, and instead of listening to them and being like, oh wow, we need to like switch up how we're doing things, they decided to reprimand the original poster and basically let this simmer in the background while nothing gets done about it. And that's honestly not fair for anybody involved in that company. So honestly, I love this petty revenge because the manager in this story absolutely deserved it. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.